Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live with us here at Dream Data. Today, I'm really excited because I've been trying to force Alex to talk with me about how whatever he's been doing at Personio for a long time. I think Personio is probably one of the most successful SaaS companies out of Europe within the last handful of years, and I'll let Alex introduce himself soon, but he's been there for 3 or 4 years now, Alex, and have been excessively been scaling the ad spend and acquiring of customers without their cost per acquisition going completely mental. So I'm super curious to hear all the workings of what it is that you guys have been doing, Alex. But I'll let you just introduce yourself for people to get to know you. But before you do that, I'll just want to say that for the people watching, just treat it as a conversation that you're part of yourself, and write questions to Alex as we go along. I've prepped some questions I have over here, which I'll be asking him. But you can just join and ask any question you'd like as well, and then we'll pull them up as we talk. But Alex, for those that have never heard about you, which I think is fair enough, what is the kind of what's your background, what's your work, what's Personio even?
Cool. Thanks so much, Stefan. And yeah, I'm definitely delighted to be here. I think I'm really impressed with the guests that you've been having recently are just people that I massively respect. So yeah, just to kind of in the same stage as them is really cool to see. So yeah, I mean, I assume most people won't know who I am, which is completely fine. So my name is Alex Venus. I'm the head of digital and web marketing at a company called Personio. At Personio, we're kind of tackling the real sort of anomaly, which is the fact that most people leaders and HR teams are still using spreadsheets or legacy systems to manage and support their most important asset, which is obviously their people. And so we provide a flexible HR management platform to automate all of your people processes. So what does that mean? Things like payroll, recruiting, onboarding, performance and development, and absence management, allowing you to kind of get back to strategy and driving impact with your team. So that's a bit about Personio. And yeah, as I say, my role is head of digital. I think digital marketing now is very different to digital marketing of say 10 years ago. So really in digital context at Personio, we break it down into really 3 distinct teams. One is paid advertising, so user acquisition through performance marketing channels. The second is through the website and web touchpoints. And the third is our sort of product growth experiment team, where we look at user acquisition through the product itself. So in-app experimentation and trial optimization. And yeah, I've been with Personio now for 3 years. Personio's is growing all the time, but it's kind of crept up on me now that I've been here for this amount of time. I hadn't thought of myself as like one of like the old timers at Personio, but now when I meet new people at Personio every day, and they're like, "Wow, Alex, you've been here for 3 years. You must be part of the furniture." So I guess I am. Like, I have seen the company transform a lot in that time. Pretty much all for the better, but yeah, it's definitely kind of crept up on me. And I'm based in London. Personio are a German headquarters company, so our main base is in Munich. But now over the growth over the last few years, we have offices and great people across the whole of Europe.
Super nice, Alex. And maybe just so you mentioned 3 teams. Did all those 3 teams basically roll up to you then?
They do now, and I think for me that's important. We want to have like kind of integrated experience. I mean, ultimately the goal of our team is to drive our North Star metric, which is accepted pipeline, and obviously from that revenue and growth. But for me, we have other areas that kind of roll these things together, which is to give a really great customer experience from the first time anyone hears about us, which is probably going to be through paid advertising most of the time. It can be obviously through organic word of mouth, but just say it's through digital to make sure there's some consistency there, that we're not a company that is, and we're talking about ad spend a lot later on, which I'm excited to talk about, that we're not spamming people to death with a message that isn't adding value or adding clarity to what we're doing, or that we're not educating them. So the common sort of theme around all of these different channels that are within digital is that we want to make sure that we provide like a great user end experience, and that we're making user-centric decisions with everything that we're doing in digital.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's how do we get them there? How do they perform on the website? And once they've become users, how do you then get them to do more of some things you'd like them to do?
100%. Yeah.
There's probably a ton to say within each of these three buckets. But if we start with the paid spend, just for people to get an idea about what are the buttons that you're normally pressing, which ad networks or which ad platforms are you guys spending money typically?
Cool. So I think we're trying to always shift as much of our performance budget as possible to that 99% of the market, which unfortunately isn't in market this time. And I think when I first joined Personio, I mean, we actually I kind of met you and got to know Dream Data at that point some time ago, like pretty fortunate timing. But really our spend was quite asymmetrical and really just focused in on demand capture and in terms of a channel like paid search, and really over investing, I feel, in some of these areas. And what we're increasingly trying to do is still cater for that in-market demand that's there through search channels, as I'm sure every single advertiser is, particularly in HR at the moment, but also shift that budget up a funnel as well. And I think the difficulty is getting that balance right. I think sometimes brand awareness just means, switching on affiliate networks and spamming people on Google display and stuff like that. It's definitely not what we're doing, or hopefully not. And for now, we're trying to get a real even balance, certainly between demand creation and demand capture, and hopefully making that imbalance, that balance to have most of our budget going up towards upper funnel channels. So I'm really interested, and we're doing a lot of experiment now with things like YouTube. And in general, what I want us to move towards are channels which are more geared towards creative versus just being present. And that is because I think still most advertisers are inherently paying for presence over really sort of getting into that creative testing and creative experimentation. So that's where I see the direction of travel. And I'm sure maybe we can chat about the future state of digital marketing in a few years. I've got a few theories and hypotheses around where channel spend is going to be going and directing to. I definitely think it's on the move. I can see this already. But at the moment, we're still probably spending the majority of our budget on Google and on these search spend channels. And that is often, sometimes you can't always have complete control of this as well, right? I think particularly in search, it's an auction by definition. So you are at the mercy of the category. And there is quite, interestingly, this kind of interdependence between you and your adversaries on search, right? Where they just decide one morning after a coffee, hey, you know what, I'm going to spend X amount of euros on Personio's brand term today. You're like, well, okay, cool. And then suddenly you're in a gunfight. And ideally, we get away from this. And I think where I want us to be outside of these kind of competitive auctions is more in a sort of a creative sort of standoff with competitors. And it's like who can experiment the most with that creative, who can create discovery content. And then there's also the other thing, which is maybe to just reduce performance spend in general and shift more towards brand marketing, more towards organic channels, which is also something which I know it sounds counterintuitive for the person who's in charge of this budget to be saying, but it's certainly something which I've been trying to advocate for, is that performance marketing sometimes just isn't the answer. It's not the holy grail. And sometimes it's good to actually look at other channels, particularly if you have more of a market position, more of an existing brand awareness, which you can build from.
a lot of questions are popping up in my head as you talk, Alex. And I think it's super interesting for somebody who's what can you say, as performance and numbers driven as you are, to say that we still need to step away from just like scraping in the low hanging fruit and not having to step up into like much more broad categories. Before we move on, I just wanted to ask a little bit about. So you said you're accountable for accepted pipeline.
Yeah.
What does that mean in Personio?
In Personio, that means a qualified opportunity that a salesperson is more than happy to be working on. So an account executive more than happy to be working on, which should have a win rate of around 25% or more. So every 1 in 4 of those opportunities, you should be converting to a closed won customer.
So it's someone who looks like somebody you normally sell to, right? Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there are, the kind of the classic sort of bank qualification rules, the rules of engagement that we look to have.
Yeah.
Make sure that they're a real business, that they're not, some sort of that they have all of the right requirements. But ultimately, it's that there's a real buying intent there in the audience, and they fit your best sort of fit ICP accounts.
Yeah, we use something similar. We call them sales acceptable leads, but it's basically the same definition. And I think it's probably the right place to measure marketing, but we all want to measure against revenue, which is great, but revenue is a very lagging indicator, and you don't always have a lot of data on every campaign. But if we as marketers can at least ensure that the people that we ship to the sales team looks like somebody who's normally going to buy our product, then the feedback cycle will be shorter, and we can still say that the input that we give to the sales team is of a certain quality.
For sure. With metrics and KPIs, I think it's probably the most important strategic decision that you can make as a business is getting the metrics right. And just because I'm here saying, we have accepted opportunities, I just want to be clear, I'm not advocating that everyone has that as their success metric. It comes down to like having a metric which is objective and which you can scrutinize. And if you have a broad definition of what an opportunity looks like, maybe that's not right for you. Maybe if you have some opportunities converting at 2% and others converting at 78%, how will you have a meeting with people and you'll say, hey, we've got 4 opportunities today? And it's like, are they going to convert? Are they not going to convert?
Yeah.
So I think for me, the most important thing is having a metric where there is complete alignment between sales and marketing, that this is something that we should care about. Like, this is an objectively good thing to have more of these. And that the conversion rate of these is predictable or within an acceptable standard deviation.
Yeah.
When I joined Personio, I think our main metric was MQLs. And again, there's a whole topic around MQLs. And I think if anything, there's a sort of negative stigma around MQLs being a metric. If your MQLs are locked down as a definition, it's completely fine to have MQLs as a success metric for marketing. And if you have maybe like smaller amounts of conversions coming in, perhaps it's the right thing to be doing. It just means that you need to have conversion rates on those MQLs, which are predictable and that you can model. So you can forecast growth, you can have actionable conversations with sales leaders. The sales leaders are happy when more of these things are materializing. And yeah, I think I've seen many examples where organizations pick the wrong metrics and then they just end up in inefficient conversations, or you're picking through data the whole time. If you can't look at a metric and go and have an objective conversation around its performance, then it's probably not the right metric for you. And then the last thing as well is it comes down to your go-to-market strategy. So for us as a business, most of our conversions are coming in through people that are either booking a demo or they're playing around in our product. And so we've got quite a traditional sort of enterprise lead gen model, I suppose, in terms of our life cycle. But if you're fully baked on product, maybe you have a sort of product qualification, or you have a whole different rule set. So yeah, it really comes down to what your go-to-market strategy is, what your biggest growth lever is, and then make sure you have complete alignment with cross-functioning your organization. And with that metric, it has to be objective. It can be a top of funnel metric, can be a lower funnel metric, but it has to be something that you can scrutinize.
I think that's really, really, really good advice. And I guess it's all about that we need to move together as one team, and not just us over here in our little marketing silo being happy about a certain metric, and then the sales team being dissatisfied or ignorant, or don't care when a metric goes up or down. Is this the metric you are then sharing with the CMO, like on a weekly or monthly basis, or something like that?
Yeah, on a monthly basis, we have pipeline. There's a kind of a mantra internally of that pipeline is lifeline, and that is very much true of Personio as well. We want to have a steady stream of pipeline creation, but then obviously of pipeline conversion as well. So that's the main metric when we look at it from marketing. Although we also look at things more upper funnel. I think there's also a tendency in a lot of organizations to just sit on a lagging metric. And I think you need to have a blend of metrics, really of any organizational side, because as a go-to-market team, you want to be able to understand where you're going to land this month, but also, certainly the quarter. And to do that, I think you need to have an understanding of like what's coming up, that future state. And for me, neither MQLs or pipeline are really the way to do it. We use metrics internally like share of branded search, which definitely has its pros and cons to it as well, where it comes down to it again, are more people searching for Personio versus competitors, and using that as somewhat of like a proxy of market share. So I think we always see a very strong correlation between how many people are Googling Personio outside of customers, and then ending up in our funnel after that. And then obviously the other thing is that you can't do it on the other side, where you just look at pipeline, and then if your win rates aren't there or there's something going on down the funnel, the marketing team's in the office, you're breaking out the champagne, you're having some pizza and that sort of stuff. But if that's not actually materializing into revenue, then the whole thing doesn't really make any sense, right? So there has to be that full view of the funnel, which is upper funnel. Are we creating demand? Is the perception of our brand changing in the market? Within that in-market segment, how are things performing? And ultimately in terms of logos as well. And I think even the last thing that's really sort of come into that is, like a lot of companies in SaaS, I think, this isn't just about Personio, but in general, I think the last sort of 5 years in the space in the US and in Europe, there was kind of a growth at all cost mentality, which was within, performance culture, I think. And now we really want to make sure that we are looking at things with CAC payback in mind, that we're always looking at how long customers are staying with us as well, and baking that into our targeting as well. So we want to get not just the right tons of customers initially, but customers that look like they're going to stay with us for a very long time as well. So we try to have a view of like the real business, even in our sort of performance metrics.
I think this goes to show kind of how complex marketing becomes as you're a part of a bigger company. Like you have to manage creatives, you have to have certain very tangible metrics. There's a multitude of systems that you're running at the same time. So I could imagine that you get a bit. I don't know if you get stressed or it's just become normal nowadays.
Ask me.
How do you take that kind of this did you call it recognized time pipeline? Qualified pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
How do you take that goal and then move into these more creating demand kind of activities? How do you make that kind of connecting the dots between you moving away from those that are in market right now and then trying to create demand, for example, through Google's different kind of advertisement platforms?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is understanding that you need to be moving away from just one attribution model and looking at channel synergies. And I think this is the mistake I see quite regularly. And it's not to say that we've perfected the Personio, is people asking the question like, what channel's best? Like what channel is working the best?
Yeah.
And I think that's the wrong question to answer. The question is, what's the relationship between these channels? So even with great platforms, obviously Dream Data is one of those where you can look at different journeys. You want to be understanding those synergies, and so we have metrics, for example, like go to Google rate, which is like a proprietary custom metrics which we've set up, which is to show essentially the relationship between our paid social spend and people that then go on to search. Because what we in general see is that maybe search is inflated in terms of attribution, even if you're looking at things through a linear view. Whereas if you look at the social channels, you're not going to see much pipeline from it. So if I take the approach of what's my master metric? My master metric is pipeline. I then go, right, okay, look at ROAS from social channels. Is this driving pipeline at the same ROAS as search? No, it's not. Does that mean I should just completely switch it off and turn it to search? No, because as we all know, there's a definitive glass ceiling on the demand that you're going to be getting in through search channels.
Yeah.
And what you want to be trying to see is what's that real halo effect of my total spend, and drilling into it from there. I think the second thing, I've spoken about master metrics, is understanding your secondary metrics, and understanding that sometimes you'll need, I think, answering not just what's happened, but why that's happened is the hardest thing, I think, in performance today. So we really care not just about like the lagging metrics, as I say, but some metrics which seem like vanity metrics on the surface, but I think can be really useful. So engagement rates, for example, within paid social platforms. I think as an aggregate metric, it's hard to understand, but if you create custom metrics within that engagement bucket, you can really start to understand what's working. So for like videos, for example, we have custom metrics like hook rate, where we look at like the first 5 seconds of a video. And that's the way you can then move into things like creative testing. If we want to look at brand creative and storytelling, we can then see on YouTube, for example, how long within the YouTube video we're able to hold people's attention. And so I think that's where we try to have a clear set of secondary metrics, which we sort of tie to our hypothesis within experiments and testing. So having those sort of agreed upon and something that you're going to be checking in on is critical as well. But yeah, like I say, I think the main thing around channels is understanding that if you just look at them and try to draw a line between them and your master metrics, I could probably predict right now which ones are going to be showing the best results.
Yeah.
But just be aware that there's a definitive ceiling in terms of what you can spend in those lower funnel channels. Yeah. And that most of the time those channels are being grossly inflated in terms of their ROI, both by the ad vendors themselves, but also by the spend and the influence you can't see from those other channels, and not just paid channels, but organic ones as well.
It's it's so interesting, and that's probably the stereotypical CFO question. Alex, what's the best channel? Okay,
yeah,
we'll go put more money into that. Well, yeah, it kind of gets exhausted at some point.
It does. Yeah.
We actually we use a lot of thought leader ads on LinkedIn, and I use the same kind of focus. I think once a month or something like that, I go to check all our thought leader ads. And then I simply just throw out the bottom half of those that has the lowest engagement rate. And then we put in some new ones. And then after a month, we'll go look again, which has the best engagement rate. And because I see that also as one of the earliest indications of whatever piece of content that you have live, whether you can expect that to trickle into MQLs and qualified pipeline and revenue 6 months down the line, or whatever we're talking about. Technical question. So you're talking about YouTube ads, and I think all of us B2B marketers would love to use YouTube more. But I think the problem that if we think beyond the retargeting, how do you run targeting on YouTube for Personio? How do you make it precise enough for you to trust that this awareness that you generate through YouTube is actually worth it for you?
Yeah, so I think the relationship between YouTube and your other channels is always going to be very difficult to see. In general, we try and break our targeting down to have like native targeting options. So like they can be essentially like an affinity audience, or it could be like the interest that they have, or obviously you can do search keyword targeting just as you can with search. The main thing to understand with these things like YouTube, and why I would try and say to be patient with it as a channel, is you're going to have to look for like an indirect correlation to the bottom line. You're not going to see it, and you've just got to remember that you are probably interrupting someone watching the video that they want to watch, whether that
like cooking dinner or something.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like you're going to be, for me, you'll be interrupting probably some cycling content or something like that. And I'm going to watch that video. Probably way too many videos. So I think just have that bear in mind. That is, the prime, what you're trying to get there, your call to action is, that cognitive reception from that person. It's the change in their thought process. It's not going to be that click on the bottom right hand side of the video. most of the time.
Yeah.
And so what is the next natural step from them? It could be, direct traffic. It could be they'll then go from there and understand your brand a bit more when you're reaching them on social. So for us, it's around trying to ideally get them to watch a certain percentage of the video and then build retargeting audiences from there. But then even then, it's about understanding that there may not be an ability to turn that into something to actually target at that point. But you are having some sort of affinity with that person if you're able to hold their attention. And even if you can't see that, you should see growth in brand traffic. You should see indirect correlations in other areas. And that's why I talk to think about your user behavior as a consumer. What would you do? I see an Instagram ad. Do I click on the ad? No. Maybe that's due to me understanding just how many things are going to be dropped to my browser if I do. But either I'll then go into a direct session, or increasingly I will do some research through like AI or something like that. And think of yourself as the user, but then also think of yourself in terms of what that sort of changing sort of psychology may be if you have good creative coming out from YouTube. I think the reticence that a lot of people have with YouTube, and I don't want to evangelize YouTube too much because it really comes down to who you are and creative testing, all that sort of stuff, is just you have to really be patient with it and be looking at it from a creative standpoint. So I think people are reticent because of attribution wise, it's never going to look great out of the box in terms of reporting, particularly on lower funnel metrics, which most people have as their main metrics. And the second one is creative investment. It's so easy and cheap to advertise on paid social. Everyone's doing it now, right? And I think YouTube, the creative bar is definitively higher, because most of the brands, I would say, that are advertising on those platforms are enterprise brands who are really trying to play for brand awareness most of the time. And so that is intimidating in terms of creative investment in a channel where it's going to be difficult to justify ROI to your CFO.
So let's say I want to get started. Would a reasonable approach be to maybe select a certain region or country and then try to run just YouTube in that country or region, and then try to monitor then afterwards if there's a change in the website traffic that we see?
100%. I mean, that's my advice in general for performance marketing. I think that the further away you can get from like a spray and pray approach with your budget, even if you have like a 7-figure budget, is the best way. If you can start in an area and try to isolate what's working, and if that's by doing it in one market, which has been our approach at Personio, say you'll test out maybe not in your most important market, but in like a secondary market first, and see if you can have a detectable effect with some sort of budget testing that you can do that, then you can scale out from there versus trying to do it in different markets and then trying to work your way back.
Okay, that's maybe a good segue to talk a little bit about what's special about running a very large budget. You don't have to say how much you run, but it's probably a significant budget that you run. So getting that one extra qualified pipeline deal per month, like that is actually that's clearly not enough to continue to fuel Personio's growth.
Yeah.
Whereas you, as let's say a 20 people company, if you find one keyword that gives you one extra opportunity per month, then that's probably great. So can you? I don't know what the right question is to say, but what are the framework for thinking about doing growth and marketing and at such a level that you're at now versus when you're in a small company?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could say the stakes are higher, but I would also argue that's relative. I've come from a startup background. It's kind of how I found my way into digital marketing, was through the fact that there was no one else to do those jobs. And
you get this task.
Yeah, and it was kind of an opportunity piece. But if you're working at a startup and you've got a monthly budget of say 10K, it's exactly the same as if you have a monthly budget of sort of 100K or $1 million, whatever. It really is relative. So I don't want to say the stakes. I think the risks are quite high. If you make an error, say on like 10% of your ad budget on the former, I think yes, maybe you can rule it out. But if you are running a 7-figure, 8-figure media budget, then the wrong URL or the wrong ad copy. It's very difficult because this is real money. I think the other thing that I really try to advocate as well is, even if you are working in this enterprise environment, you do have these types of spends. Don't normalize that spend as if it's monopoly money. Like, this is real money. So treat it as if like you are the business owner, and like every euro counts. So I'd say it's the first thing. I've spoken a bit about the risks, I suppose. There are definitely opportunities, and I think particularly if you are in a category where you don't want to spend but other people will, you'll really struggle to play. And I think with Google now in particular, that there is a shift in those platforms where budget does talk, and they're gearing platforms now towards automated bid strategies and getting out the learning phase and letting the algorithm do it. You will struggle now if you have limited budget where you need to rely on manual bidding strategies or manual targeting, in a world where like the platforms themselves want you to be basically inserting your credit card and letting their algorithms do the targeting. So you will struggle there. I think the positives of having budget are you will be able to spend across more segments and more areas of the funnel. So if I was, for example, working with less budget, my bread and butter to Personio is to be the checkout at the bottom of the funnel, is to capture demand that's there. And if I was starting again tomorrow, that's the first thing I'd do, is make sure that if people are in market for something like what we're selling, is that we would be present in that auction, and we would be paying at the, trying to get a decent ROAS on those money keywords. Now you have more than that budget that's required to do that thing. What am I going to do with it? Well, the next thing I want to do is the other part of my goal, which is to generate demand in the market and generate awareness. And again, even with those audiences, there's a minimal viable amount that you'll need to be in these platforms. And the real sort of thing beyond just being present across the funnel is having enough budget to be able to experiment with it. So have a loss on a different channel that you're trying to work out. I mean, I'm definitely too old to understand TikTok, but I'm very curious about it. Can we start running TikTok ads? Is there a new sort of technology that we can be looking into, maybe on the back end side and the MarTech side, or maybe in terms of audience targeting side, that we would be happy to spend time and invest in? Most of the time it's reaching different audiences. So maybe you could only reach 50% of your ICP with a degree of spend, because that you would have to have a completely different campaign in LinkedIn to target the other side. So it gives you opportunities. I think that's what spend gives you, and it gives you the ability to have more of an experiment and testing model that you probably wouldn't be able to have, because there are these kind of things that you just have to be in. Like, you have to be in those auctions, unfortunately, on the bottom of the funnel to capture demand, to then give you the capacity to then scale and have an impact further up the funnel.
Yeah, I'm also like thinking about the experiments that you choose. I guess you have to guide your team in. We cannot just be searching for like small inches here and there. We need to, because Personio is at a quite significant annual recurring revenue now. So if you are to continue growing that with 40, 50, 60, 70%, marketing needs to also find those 40, 50, 60, 70% somewhere. So is that kind of something you talk with your team about, training them at looking at particular experiments versus other experiments?
Yes, but I think to those degrees that you're speaking about, I think that's where to grow at 40, 50, 60% year on year in terms of performance marketing outlay is very, very difficult.
All the low-hanging fruits are gone by now.
The low-hanging fruits aren't there, right? And I think as well, it comes down to the deal cycles that you have, like the accounts that you're targeting, like where you are in the market, who you're speaking to. But at some point, you need to have a relationship between your brand investments and your performance marketing investments. I definitely think for a lot of startups, like, performance marketing as a starting base is good, because brand takes a long time to materialize. If you're a startup, you're often not a bootstrapped company, right? So you need to amplify your message a lot quicker. You need to be reaching people in a targeted way, which, SEO is a very much a changing channel, but is definitely not a growth hack or a quick win. Neither is brand awareness. But at some point, you need to have that relationship between them. And I think performance marketing is, sometimes seen as the only way to reach an audience. And I think for me that I'm seeing some really, really good examples at the moment of people getting crazy reach on organic, not just as individuals, but as brand as well. And that for me is just shows that, it's good to have that balance. And I think ideally the dream of any company, right, is to be growing at those sort of growth rates that you were saying, but with a performance marketing spend where your ROAS is really, really strong, and you're not doing it looking at like a multiple year payback. You're getting it back in like a world-class payback period. So that's the end goal for any SaaS businesses, where people are just knocking on the door, coming to you predominantly through word of mouth and organic reach, versus you consistently jumping into every auction that's available.
Yeah, I didn't prep you for this question, Alex, but have you guys started to do, what can you call them, integrated campaigns where there's, I don't know, TV and billboards and radio involved, and then you kind of join into that kind of the same messaging through the digital ads and the experiments that you run?
Yeah, we've run some integrated campaigns. I mean, we've done out of home for a while. It comes down to different markets. So as I said, Personio are a European provider, so we provide solutions across the whole of Europe, but we are in a very, very different sort of market position in Germany versus the other areas of the business. And so when we're looking at those types of investments, we need to be aware that the message needs to land well. I'm not saying that we're a household name and every person in Germany is aware of us, but awareness and affinity means different things. I think reaching every single person in the market isn't necessarily the end goal. So even just like an integrated campaign, but in a more sort of tactical way at a given segment, is kind of the approach that sometimes makes sense for us. But yeah, we do try and have this kind of orchestration. I mean, it does take a while to have that consistent message resonating and landing in the market, but we try to have a sort of a designed relationship between our channels, but then also an indirect relationship between the channels. And you're never going to get this approach where someone sees a billboard and then goes home and listens to a podcast and you're advertising on it, and then they get an email. I think I would definitely have to say, forget this idea of like a linear user journey, which I'm sure you guys know all about, right? With Dream Data. And also don't predict that someone's going to read email 3, then email 4, then go on the landing page. It just doesn't happen. And you can see it through opportunity analysis that there is no real distinct linear user journey. The most important thing is just having those, those few messages locked in. So what's that sort of like high altitude message that you're going to have? What's that product level, platform level message that you're going to have? And then just make sure these things are baked into everything you're doing. And there's a few brands that I really look up to where straight away, like every single creative that they have across every touch point, every performance ad, it's just, it's always the same. And that for me is the key. Like, have your messages locked down. If you've got them done at like a personalized level for a different segment, great. But just make sure you have those, to the point where the repetition is almost nauseating. Like that's where you want to have it. And that's how the way that you get the integration. I don't think you get the integration between channels by, through pixels or trying to get someone to click a link. You get it through messaging, you get it through product positioning.
That's really nice. So people listening and don't have a messaging document or a framework established, that's a good place to start then.
Yes.
And now you talked quite a bit about creatives, and I think for me personally, also, I'm even old for YouTube maybe, but what kind of for these more like creative elements, kind of, what's a way to like tangibly start improving these? Is it tools, or is it particular freelancers that we should be looking to hire, or like what are you doing to like improve the level of creatives that you put out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky. We've got some like amazing creatives at Personio, and something that we really champion is like the investment in design, creative direction as well is something that we really try to value and investing in the business. For me, this is one of the biggest changes in digital marketing in the last sort of 10 years or so since I've been doing it, is the profile of performance teams. I think traditionally we used to have people who were maybe from like an engineering and developer background, programming folks, and that was very much sort of geared towards like the algorithmic, programmatic space of search. Whereas now, when I'm looking at hiring and building teams in paid, I'm looking, one, like, are they a marketer? Like, are they really curious about this stuff? Could they sell the product ultimately to our customer if they're in a room with them?
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, like making sure that you have these design functionalities, ideally, if not in your team, with a very, very close dotted line to your team. So for us, we have, designers, like motion designers, both as full-time headcount, but then also we're looking to have like, specialist freelance resources around that. And I think that now for me is the biggest growth lever in performance is creative experimentation and testing, because most people are just either too scared to do it, they don't know how to do it. But if you're all in the auction, you're all, you have your RSAs there, you have your bid set up correctly, your focus needs to be on that 98%, and that way that you stop that scroll and that doom scroll is through like best in class creative. And so you need to have those skill sets. And I think having marketing generalists or traditional sort of performance folk trying to do that stuff is going to lead to pretty average results. That you need to have quite a visionary setup on the design side and bake that into your team structure, I think, these days, to really have like a real impact on those social channels.
Yeah, and I guess it's just a natural consequence of all of us knowing that digital ads are great, and everybody tells each other that, and all these things are all the ads are delivered through auctions. So more and more people are getting into this auction, and it will only continue to get more and more expensive. So the only way to keep the cost of your investment down is to make sure that the creatives that you put into your auction is the most appealing for the audience when it's received.
100%. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I would say that most creatives aren't great. I think if you look through, if you scroll through the feed, I mean, people have spoken about like the blindness that we have now to advertising through that saturation of different channels. So I think the ability to be an advertiser now, almost anyone could do it. It's really become quite democratized. But to break through that noise is very, very difficult. And so you have to have a process. You have a data-driven model and look at creative reporting just as you're looking at business reporting, to really sort of add that extra layer into it. And I think, from an investment perspective, both in terms of headcount and moving that budget away from media and distribution, I think a lot of people are very sort of reticent to do it, particularly in a climate as well where everyone's being asked to show a stronger ROAS or have some quick wins on pipeline and that sort of stuff. It's difficult to say, hey, give me 6 months to do like a creative sprint and see what we can do for this given segment on this given channel. It's hard to get that sort of headspace sometimes to do that, but it's something I'm super passionate about, and I've got great confidence that this is the direction of travel for most performance. I feel like there's going to be a diminishing impact from your traditional performance channels, and the shift of that spend will either go outside of performance entirely or towards channels where it's really set up for like creatives to shine.
Yeah. On this particular topic, are there any people or resources or books that just is top of your mind right now that I can go study and the people listening afterwards?
Yeah, I think there's a brand I evangelize about a lot. It's almost become like a meme internally, if I'm honest, like Superside, who are like a design as a service company. I mean, they have to practice what they preach, right? But they have some really, really great content on scaling design operations, both within paid advertising teams, but in general marketing teams. Definitely recommend checking them out. They don't waste your time. It's not like a 5-point checklist to have good design. It's really well researched and well backed content. So I'd say study them, and then just grab time with like creatives internally in your company as well. I think it's amazing what comes out of like getting marketers and designers in a room together. I'm pretty inspired whenever we do that internally, or I speak to like the brand people internally who are, you know, way smarter than me, and I'm like, my God, like, you know, you guys are really great people to be sparring ideas with, and that bring them into your campaign ideation phase and see what ideas can come out of it. And I'm pretty confident you'll be really happy with the results.
Yeah, we just like a micro example of that, when we're running these text ads on LinkedIn. We typically get together as a team to kind of battle to come up who can come up with the most funny like thumb stopping or like just straight out crazy text ads, and then we put them up and see which gets the best engagement rate. And people try all sorts of different things, and like, you know, our designer thinks completely different than what I would be putting into the advertisement. So I can definitely recommend trying to just squeeze together people of different backgrounds, trying to hear how they would solve the same task as you.
For sure, yeah.
As we are approaching the end here, Alex, I guess a couple of last questions. One is, so you've already been talking a bit about what you're looking for in the future. So I want to ask that question first, and then afterwards, I think we should look at what are some of the common mistakes that you can advise B2B marketers to stay away from afterwards. But the first question, so you've talked a lot about creatives. As you look at towards the next couple of years, or just the next year, because that's long in marketing, what are the kind of tactics, tools, ideas that you're looking to try out? You don't have to disclose the complete plan, but that you'll be looking for together with your team.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a line in terms of where I can go here.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, yeah, I would leave this call to not having a job. But at a very high level, I would say, yeah, the two competitive areas which I should look into. One is creative, which I've spoken about. The other one is, you know, if you're going to make best friends with two people in the company right now, I'd say, yeah, one is a creative director in your business. The second one is probably a data scientist. And I think having like proprietary targeting, where you're not reliant on native targeting rules, is a way to get that competitive differential against other people. Like for us, for example, we just add in HR job function targeting and away we go. There's nothing wrong with broad targeting. Having broad targeting is good. But I think the thing that interests me a lot is using like machine learning models, using the data science teams that people can get access to really craft out their best fit audience as like a real model that they can then feed into paid platforms. And so I think like advanced targeting, I think, is kind of something that is going to be a constant theme, not just for, you know, for my team, but in general. I think where people are going to go, hey, you know, how can we find that 1% best fit within that spend, so we don't need to spend the other 90%, like or 99%. And I think that's something where we're consistently see that theme, where there'll be more advanced data models, because I feel like that is definitely the direction that things are going in now. So yeah, speak to your data science team. They're again so smart, and the same with the creative team. And I think they're the for me, like the two people that can probably influence your performance strategy the most.
Yeah, makes complete sense. If you were then to just reflect a little bit about what's the most common mistakes that like people in your types of B2B marketing roles should be aware about?
So I've spoken to it a bit already, which is just trying to put all of your spend towards a channel that is driving the most revenue or most results at this time. I think longer term and be aware of the limitations of certain channels. I hate cookie cutter tactics as well, or this kind of, you know, let's just have like tofu, mofu, bofu messaging and have that. It's like there's more nuance to it than that right now. And I think just be aware of how high like the creative bar needs to be to break through saturated channels. And I think really sort of zoom out away from channels and think about the messages that you're trying to land and amplifying that, and what you can do on organic before you're doing on paid. So in general, if I had to summarize it, is don't rush to implement best practice, and try to scale down as well as scaling up spend as well. Like if you can provide a strong ROAS on a channel and you can isolate what's working and take learnings from that spend as well, like not just showing a graph that's going up, but understand what's causing that as well, down to like a headline or like a design cue. That these are really, really powerful things that you can build from. And I think sometimes just by turning the taps on and chucking spend at the situation, it can achieve some results, but also it makes it increasingly difficult for you to understand what is working and isn't working. So yeah, they would be the main ones. And I think just in general, like the basics have never been more important in marketing. So like, focus on the fundamentals before you get into the channel tactics.
Yeah, I can confirm that kind of testing things organically before you put a lot of budget into them can be proved to be a quite nice tactic. We do it particularly a lot with LinkedIn, where a lot of people from our team post a lot of stuff organically. Whenever we see something go kind of semi-viral or viral, we know that it's a good piece of creative that we can then put money behind to kind of unfreeze a cold audience, because it resonated really well when this employee posted it organically. Cool, Alex. If people have an extra question that they didn't dare to ask you, what is the best path that they can take?
Cool. So feel free, if any of this has been interesting, to send me a DM on LinkedIn. Happy to grab a coffee and chat through anything if you want to delve a bit more into that. If you're interested more in Personio than me, which is almost certainly the case, feel free to follow us on Instagram. You can see inside Personio, and like sort of follow us in there and see what life's like and what we're about as a brand. They're very easy to reach, and happy to connect with people. So however I can help.
Wonderful, Alex. And to everybody who's been following along, thank you so much for spending the time with us. And Alex, it's been very educational as usual. So thank you very much for that.